and the Assembly is also 3-0. We're now on the Department of Food and Agriculture, and this is the Nutrition Incentive Market Match Program, bill that Assemblyman Ting has been moving through the process.
Yes, Brian Brown, Legislative Analyst Office again. The Senate added $2.5 million from the general fund to augment nutrition assistance spending to allow individuals to purchase produce at California farmers markets. Our comments are just that the proposal certainly probably has merit, but much like other general fund augmentations, you'll just have to balance with your other general fund priorities.
Ms. Bosler.
This proposal was not part of our budget, and as Mr. Brown noted, there is a policy bill moving through the process on this issue.
Sure. Okay. All right. Again, this is, I think, a creative proposal and idea that we would encourage folks who are in our CalFresh program, in our WIC program, to get the benefits of fresh fruits and vegetables at our farmers market that are locally grown, to deal with the growing fact of diabetes and obesity in lower income communities who don't have access to the nourishment of fresh fruits and vegetables. So to give them the incentive, we would double that match and of the benefits of CalFresh and WIC, but we'll keep this open for now.
We're closing to withdraw 39.
Page 39 is Governor's proposal regarding organic waste.
This is a proposal. I understand there's been some technical issues identified, and I'd like to pull this proposal
We'll
for now.
Take you at your word, no problem there.
Consider it further.
All right. Rejected at this time. Page 40 is the California Animal Health and Food Safety Laboratory System. Governor's proposal.
We're prepared to take the Senate.
This was a proposal in the January budget to really address an issue that's been long-standing related to our animal health and food safety laboratory system that is a joint effort between the Department of Food and Agriculture and UC. The proposal is $4.3 million to address employee compensation costs that have been increasing over many years and have caused a baseline deficiency in the management of these important laboratories that are really a frontline protection to public health and the health and safety of our animal agricultural system in California. So that is the basis of our proposal in January.
Thank you, Ms. Bosler. Senate and Assembly both approved, but with some additional language on the Senate side. Mr. Brown.
That's right. The difference between the House is just the budget bill language approved by the Senate, which would require the department to annually adjust its budget in accordance with any cost increases associated with the UC employees that work at the lab. We think this is a reasonable way to adjust the budget and ensure that it keeps track with their actual operating costs.
And I would agree with you. Assemblywoman Weber?
We move the Senate version.
Okay, we have a motion for the Senate. Ms. Bosler, do you want to comment before we take that vote?
We have no significant concerns.
Okay. Motion for the Senate, page 40. 3021. Page 41 is our fairs and expositions. Governor's proposal.
Yes, in the January budget, we had a multi-pronged effort to really shore up the fiscal health of our network of fairs throughout the state. Some monies were allocated, 1.4 million general fund was, sorry. So yeah, so a part of the money was associated with providing fiscal support for the smallest fairs that are having significant fiscal abilities to stay open. There was also some money allocated for deferred maintenance, and then also a small amount of money allocated to the State Department of Food and Agriculture to provide technical assistance and training to the entire network of fairs necessary to ensure efficient operation of these state assets.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Both houses approved the administration's budget request. The Senate added budget bill language that would require reporting on the fiscal health of fairs and strategies to address the potential fiscal insolvency. We think the language is reasonable and provide for additional legislative oversight.
Was it your suggestion that the budget bill language might better be supplemental report language?
It could be. It could. You could do it either as budget bill or as supplemental report language.
Okay. Senator Lara.
Mr. Chair, I move the Assembly version with the SRL.
Okay, so we'll convert the reporting to SRL, but definitely, I think we all agree that the information from the report will be beneficial to us. Ms. Bosler, you don't think so?
I understand the spirit of the oversight, absolutely. I think our concern is during the recession, there was significant reductions to both the support for the local fairs, but also the department's administration oversight of the fairs as well. And so I think our concern is just that there's adequate staffing at the Department of Food and Agriculture to ensure that this report could be met. So that's something we would want to continue to work on in terms of making sure that that report is meaningful and is able to be complied with.
Okay. So we do have a motion for the Assembly version with supplemental report language. That's 3-0 and 3-0. Yes, well aware. Moving on to net metering on military bases, page 42. And Ms. Bosler?
Yeah, this was trailer bill language put forward as part of the May revise. It will allow homes on military properties to be designated as separate premises for the purposes of the state's net energy metering program. And it will further the implementation of more small solar, wind, biogas, and fuel cell generators, which helps to meet the 2030 climate goals.
And Mr. Brown, is this a policy consideration?
We believe so. The Assembly approved the proposal. The Senate did not hear the proposal. We believe that it is a policy issue that should be heard through the policy process and is not necessary to enact the budget.
All right. I think there's yet to be found agreement between the two houses, so we're going to keep this one open. Colleagues, our last page of our first reading. Soak it in. And we're not going to go through this. This has to do with our cap and trade program. Happy to hear from Ms. Bosler, but I think we all agree that it's very complex. Number one, it's a large sum of money. Number two, and it does not need to be determined by our June 15th deadline, but I'll let you take it from there.
Yes, so the governor's approach in the May revision related to cap and trade was really three-pronged. First of all, the expenditures are consistent with the current investment plan. There are also expenditures that are made to further the 2030 climate goals that were recently announced, as well as where there were co-benefits that could be had by reducing greenhouse gas emissions and also reducing water usage. Given the unprecedented drought that the state is facing, there was also an emphasis on putting monies in programs that could do both. I will note that the governor's proposal includes a prudent reserve of $500 million. The administration believes there is significant uncertainty with these auctions and that it would not be prudent to set up ongoing programs that could not be supported by lower revenues that may come in the future. I would note, though, that we did have results of a recent auction that was not incorporated into our May revision proposal, and we would note that recent auction did provide an additional $140 million in revenues that was not anticipated in our May revision proposal.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Bosler. Mr. Brown, I know that the LAO has a handout, and if you could give just a brief side-by-side comparison of the two houses.
Sure, sure. And maybe if you could turn to page 1, that provides the table with the funding differences. And just overall, big picture, the governor's proposal included $2.2 billion in funding from cap and trade revenue. The Senate added a net additional $495 million. The Assembly added $180 million. If you look at the table, the Senate is in the middle column, and about halfway down the table, you get into the differences between the houses. The major difference, funding-wise, is the Senate includes $500 million for disproportionately affected communities program, which would provide funding to local communities to allocate funds. There were some other changes made in the Senate. On the Assembly side, some of the larger augmentations were $50 million for a combined funding for transportation grants and expanded transit passes, biomass power generation grants, and there are a variety of other differences that are included in the table there that I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
So again, we're going to be spending the summer months in greater detail on all of this. On a higher level question, Mr. Brown, what's your take on future expectations of where the auctions are going to lead us? And will it continue to grow? Are we going to reach a limit to our growth? Will it then stabilize? Might we see reductions? And your take on the $500 million reserve as the governor proposes?
So as far as the revenue, I mean, we've said, I mean, and we do agree with the administration that there's a lot of uncertainty about future revenue. And most of that uncertainty is just on the allowance price, and that depends on a lot of different factors, a lot of different economic factors that are very difficult to predict. Assuming that the prices stay where they have been, which is near the minimum price, then the revenues would be relatively steady, I think, over the next couple of years. But there's a lot of uncertainty about the price.
In the whole scheme of cap and trade, as it succeeds in reducing greenhouse gas emissions, what programmatically does that do to the cost of allowances?
To the extent sort of the other AB 32 policies reduce greenhouse gas emissions, then that tends to put downward pressure on the prices. But again, there is a minimum price for the allowances that are auctioned off, so it wouldn't drop below that, but would perhaps sort of prevent an increase in the price to the extent
we may see a stabilization in revenue.
Sure, and revenues, at least the prices have been relatively stable. The big change that has happened, of course, is just the number of allowances
fuels
that have been auctioned.
Right.
Yes.
And no additions to the system itself once we now have transportation fuels in it.
There's one issue on the regulatory front, the third compliance phase. I believe it's scheduled that the assistance, the number of free allowances that go out to certain industries are scheduled to drop down a little bit. And they were scheduled to drop down in the second compliance period, but ARB then sort of pushed that deadline back to the third compliance period. So that's something to consider in the future.
How does our partnership with other governmental agencies out of state impact the system itself?
I believe that's very, very difficult to concern. I mean, difficult to answer. Yeah. Excuse me. I think from a sort of theoretical perspective, from a theoretical economic perspective, there's a lot of economists would argue, linking with other entities would help sort of reduce the overall costs of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. However, the results of California linking or coordinating with other territories or states is just not known right at this point.
Okay. I don't see any other comments from the committee. So Senator Nielsen, you get the last word.
Variously, these programs have been effected at various stages. Do we have a good ability to track and monitor whether or not they're really achieving any purpose in saving emissions? There's a lot of money being spent on different things, and are we tracking in any way some of these things to determine if they really are meeting the tests? Do we have any studies? How are we following up?
Yes, Matt Alme, Department of Finance. As part of the administration's package, there's a cap and trade expenditure plan, but there's also money for the Air Resources Board, essentially to coordinate and track and monitor all of these programs. And the legislature several years ago put in an annual reporting requirement where the administration reports on an annual basis the outcomes of all of the different programs. The first report this year came out, I want to say it was in the March timeframe, that gave kind of the latest update on where each of the programs were. And as
each is where they were in terms of spending money, or where they are in terms of trade-off?
in terms of,
Reducing
I would
greenhouse gases, I think.
Yeah, I would say three things. One is how much money's been spent to date. Second, how much that money is benefits disadvantaged communities, which is one of the requirements, as well as an estimate of how much emission reductions are achieved. Now, admittedly, a lot of these programs are new, and the Air Board is undertaking an extensive review of making sure that we're tracking all of the GHG reductions that are a result of that. And I think the report indicated that they will continuing to fine-tune those estimates, and it will be part of the annual report. So there's built-in accountability mechanisms embedded in the cap and trade program.
I appreciate that. I'll try to pay more attention to them myself, prospectively.
Senator Nielsen, it's not only a completely reasonable question, it is the question for us to ask. These are large sums of money. I support the program entirely. It will take us years to really determine in fine point exactly the amount of emission reductions achieved, but I can tell you, speaking from the Bay Area, for example, and I know rural communities will have their own benefits, but in the Bay Area, for example, we're seeing a lot of population growth as a result of the economic growth that we're seeing. It's like a new gold rush. People are rushing to the area to get their part of it, and so that really brings a lot of additional demands to our infrastructure. Our roads are so crowded. One of among the many things that our cap and trade program is doing is finally providing a new and dedicated revenue source for transit. And transit, of course, not unlike highway systems, need funds to reinvest and expand, and to make sure that people do have a way to get around without getting in an automobile, because the roads just can't afford any more automobiles, and of course that only enhances greenhouse gas emissions. So just on that one fine point, that is a great accomplishment that this program has brought us.
I gather the transit authorities then are in some way, on their own ways, reporting the ridership, which would be expected to go up. Then on the other side, do we have an accountability of the traffic on the freeways and highways, if that's going down, or?
I'll let the LAO respond to that, but with regard to our Bay Area Rapid Transit District, we have the highest rates of ridership than we ever have, and there's now talk about, is there a need for a second tunnel? They're in the process of buying more cars so we can add more cars to the trains because the demand is so great. It's not always so pleasant at rush hour to get a seat on one of those trains or even standing room. But that's just one of the many benefits. Ms. Bosser, you're happy to comment? Mr. Brown, and then we're going to conclude.
An unrelated point to this discussion, but I just wanted to make a point about the timing of the cap and trade package, and we will continue to work on a compromise there. But there are some expenditures that are time sensitive and related to the drought, specifically related to appliance efficiency programs and other programs that were part of the governor's executive order a month or so back. And so those monies, we would like to see move as expeditiously as possible to address the drought.
Okay, Ms. Brown, anything last to add?
I don't believe so. I mean, I think we would just, offer our support in trying to make sure that there are good sort of metrics and there's good information that would allow the legislature to sort of evaluate the outcomes of the spending that's going out the door. So.
So thank you all. We have completed our first read of the book. We'll be back on Monday. A lot of work will be going on between now and then so that we can close out all the remaining open items at that time, because we've got to get this budget to print as early as possible, early next week, so we can be respectful of Senator Nielsen's 72-hour request, which I've told you at a minimum will be 48. So again, thank you all for all the time and effort that we've put into this so far. We've made great strides, and I'm confident that not only do we meet our June 15th deadline, but it will be a budget that the people of California will be proud of. So thanks again. We are adjourned.